Joining me to my left, Miss Caroline James. Caroline, just a few minutes ago, you gave us that report about the Auditor General's report on fighting corruption here in Cayman. Now, one of the things we were talking about in the break was the involvement of the Deputy Governor in all of this. But there's one interesting piece of legislation where he actually is not involved. He does not oversee it. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. Yeah, one of the key findings in the Auditor General's report, and Sue Winspear did actually take time to praise the sort of existing framework and things that government have done to make things less corrupt and make things more transparent. But the key thing she highlighted as not yet having been implemented was that Standards in Public Life law, which was approved by the LA in 2014, but it's not yet come into force. So that was one area that she was really pressing government to implement, and that doesn't fall under the Deputy Governor, under his remit. So that's something that Cabinet will have to enforce themselves. And that's the piece of legislation that ensures that anyone in government will have to declare any sort of company that they might own or any interest that might be contradictory with their role as a public officer. And
was there any indication of is she able to put any pressure on cabinets to address this? I mean, this is not the first time that we've reported on the fact that this law is not yet been enacted. What can she do? Does she have any chance to lobby or to pressure this through? Well,
I think the first thing she's done is make it the sort of key finding of her report, and bringing that to the spotlight, us talking about it, other media organisations talking about it, is going to heap on that pressure on Cabinet that, hey, we haven't forgotten about this law, we're still expecting it to be implemented. There's been no time frame even given, so we can't even say, you know, it'll be done next year, the following year, 6 months' time. It's just this very vague, gone off into the ether and legislation that you know, she has highlighted as the key thing that needs to be done to move forward with showing that Cayman is a country that fights corruption and is transparent.
Right. And Mr. Manderson, again, he is affiliated, in charge. He oversees the AntiCorruption Commission, for instance, and other entities that deal with fighting corruption here in Cayman. What can he do? I mean, again, this is something that it has to be dealt with by Cabinet, but obviously he is there. And certainly you would think, just as an outsider looking in, that being involved in these other things, he also might be feeling a little bit of pressure from maybe those at the ACC to say, hey, make sure to bring this up in the meeting next Tuesday. You know, make sure that everybody knows that this is an important piece of legislation.
And it's actually very interesting that you say that, Kevin, because the response that came out from the Deputy Governor's office, the actions that are set to be taken is all very, they use words like to seek. And, you know, to seek, again, to explore the extension. It's all words that suggest to me, you know, we're going to try our best, but we're not concretely doing anything constructive. And
I do want to clarify there, as my producer just mentioned, Mr. Manderson himself is not overseeing it. It's the governor's office that actually oversees the ACC as well. So what happens next? Again, you said that there's no timeline, so I mean, does Ms. Winspear have anything else planned that we can kind of keep this in the headlines or keep this push to have this legislation enacted? What can we do?
Well, we're here at Cayman 27. We're asking those exact questions. We're seeking to talk to people who are involved in those committees that are looking after that legislation, the Auditor General's office themselves. We're asking them, you know, legally, do they have any sort of remit or real power to make a difference to this? You know, telling the government it should be done is one thing, but actually imposing the momentum on them that it actually needs to be done because there's penalties or, you know, finger wagging is one thing, but a serious penalty would make all the difference. So those are the questions we'll be putting to the office in the next few days.
And again, we got a little bit into the Deputy Governor's response to all this, but generally speaking, what was the, I guess, tone, what was the general feel of the response that you got from Mr. Manderson?
Well, it seems very much that he seized upon the positives that she mentioned, and it would be churlish not to mention that the tone of her report is encouraging, it's positive, it's that things have been done since her last report, issues have been addressed, things are getting better, but it's not perfect, there are still things left to be done. So the Deputy Governor is taking stock and appreciating that people have done things well to improve the situation and rightly taking some time to be proud of the steps that have been done and hope that momentum continues forward with the other ideas that they're proposing, as we talked about earlier.
Was there anything specific maybe that stood out to you that came from the Deputy Governor?
Well, I guess it's something that we didn't talk about in terms of the Deputy Governor, but the report focused on the Planning Department as just an example of where they could really analyse how effective the existing frameworks were. And they said that that was an important area to look at, not just because there's so much going on in Cayman in terms of infrastructure, both public and private, that's being developed, but also because it's such a benchmark of the economy and such a contributor that it's one of those areas that is really important to put under the microscope to make sure that everything there is tickety-boo, as we'd say.
I'm unfamiliar with that phrase, but I think I know what you mean. Did it say anything about the efficiency or just how productive the current measures to fight corruption in Cayman are?
Well, actually, that was another interesting element. They said that it's very difficult to gauge effectiveness, and one of the recommendations was to, highlight the benchmarks that you could use. Efficiency and effectiveness were two words that came up, but that takes a lot of time. These investigators are small teams, and forcing them to try and measure how effective something is against vague goalposts is going to be difficult, and it's going to be time consuming. So that may be one recommendation that just can't be brought to fruition.
All right. Caroline, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your insight. All right, don't go anywhere. We've got more Cayman 27 News coming up right after this.